Agenda 21, Sustainable Development, and it is being orchestrated outside or through the United Nations, and it is a stalking horse, a Trojan horse for world fascism, as I'm going to go through and explain. Agenda 21 was agreed at the 1992 Earth Summit in Brazil, which was headed by this guy, Maurice Strong, one of the gang big time, a mate of Al Gore, and he said, Maurice Strong, this billionaire oil man, etc., he said, isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring this about? What they are trying to do and planning to do is use saving the environment, which these buggers are destroying, to justify deindustrialization and the end of democracy and democratic, which is another thing I could talk about. Democracy and freedom, interchangeable? Don't think so. Anyway, this is the wish list in documents for Agenda 21 operating through the United Nations. An end to national sovereignty, all justified by saving the world, by the way. An end to national sovereignty. State planning and management of all land resources, ecosystems, deserts, forests, mountains, oceans and fresh water. Agriculture, rural development, biotechnology and ensuring equity, equal slavery. The state is to define the role of business and financial resources. Abolition of private property is not sustainable, they say. Here we go again. How many times has this come up? Restructuring the family unit. Children to be raised by the state. People told, this is what Aldous Huxley said in Brave New World, people told what their job will be. Major restrictions on movement. Creation of human settlement zones. I'll get to them in a minute. Mass resettlement as people are forced to vacate land where they live, for reasons I'm coming to. Dumbing down education, achieved a long time ago. Mass global depopulation in pursuit of all of the above. And what they're doing to hide it is they're setting Agenda 21 organizations up in all local communities, all over the world, America, Britain, all over the place. And they're giving the impression that each of these is basically an independent local community initiative, when it's all being orchestrated through this organization, through the United Nations, called Local Governments for Sustainability. So when I came across all this stuff, I thought I'll have a look at the Isle of Wight, a few miles by a few miles, and I found that the Isle of Wight had joined Agenda 21 in November 2000. And it says on the Agenda 21 Isle of Wight website that it was developed and written in partnership with the people of the Isle of Wight and reflects their vision for the future of the island. Ever since I saw that, I have been asking everyone I meet on the Isle of Wight, have you ever heard of Agenda 21? No, mate, no, mate, no, mate. Nobody's heard of it. And yet, it was the people. This is going on all over the world. And they openly talk in some of these organizations connected to it about the post-democratic, post-industrial world, which is basically symbolized in so many movies recently. This is Jean Monnet, the so-called founding father of what became the EU, and a Rothschild frontman, in a letter to a friend one day after I was born, 60 years ago. And he said, Europe's nations should be guided towards the superstate without their people understanding what is happening. This can be accomplished by successive steps, each disguised as having an economic purpose, but which will eventually and irreversibly lead to federation. And now we're having Jose Manuel Barroso coming out in the last few weeks calling for a federation of states with absolute loyalty to Brussels to sort out the problems that these buggers have on purpose created. Problem, reaction, solution. So we had this always bad, big bad communist war, always terrible, and the Cold War. And so then, because they wanted to encompass those countries into NATO and the European Union, along comes Gorbachev, smiley, happy, feely, the Berlin Wall comes down, and bingo, we have another version of the Soviet Union, but because people have a vote in pathetic European elections for a parliament that has no power, we're told it's not a communist or fascist state, it's actually a democratic entity. And they signed the Treaty of Rome that created what became the European Union on Mons Saturnis, Capitoline Hill. It has very great symbolic significance for them. So, also, totalitarian tiptoe is globalization. Globalization is simply the incessant centralization of power in every area of our lives. Thus, it is the agenda I've been talking about all these years unfolding before our eyes. And what they do is they abuse both sides of this globalization. They abuse the people who are making this stuff under starvation wages and horrific conditions, and then they charge as much as they can get away with in the West to make as much money as they can from selling it to the richer world. And the idea of globalization and bringing down so-called trade barriers is to create a situation where every part of the world is dependent upon some other part of the world and don't have the ability to be self-sustaining. Because once you lose the ability to be self-sustaining, you're now at the mercy of forces and changes you have no power over. That's the idea. Now, Zbigniew Brzezinski, big mentor of Barack Obama, one of the demo cons, he was the national security advisor to Jimmy Carter, and he wrote in another of his prophetic books, because he knows what's coming, called America's Role in the Technotronic Era, 1970, "The technotronic era involves the gradual appearance of a more controlled society. Such a society would be dominated by an elite unrestrained by traditional values. Soon it will be possible to assert almost continuous surveillance over every citizen and maintain up-to-date, complete files containing even the most personal information about the citizen. These files will be subject to instantaneous retrieval by the authorities." 1970 he wrote that. Now, we've had a technocracy which is defined as government by technicians, specifically management of society by technical experts, including bankers, by the way, that includes. And look at what we've now got in Italy. We have, in one of the biggest economies and major countries of Europe, we have a government with not one elected official in it, headed by this guy, Mario Monti. And we had a situation in Greece where we had this guy, Lucas Papademos, as a banker, leader of the country, never seen a ballot box in his life. This organisation that I mentioned, I know, these bloodlines are bloody good lookers, aren't they? Hey? I blame the inbreeding myself. This is Brzezinski, comes from the planet Zog. And this is David Rockefeller. Now, they co-founded the Trilateral Commission, one of those organizations in that Bilderberg Council on Foreign Relations network with the Club of Rome that I've shown. And it just so happens that Mario Monti, before he became unelected leader of Italy, was the European head of the Trilateral Commission, and Lucas Papademos was a member of it. This is the first step to justifying problems, not least financial, to take away even the right of people to choose their own government, rubbish as most of them are anyway, but at least we've got a right to, at least in theory, choose it, but no choice at all. Bringing the technocrats in, this is absolutely in line with Agenda 21. And these bloody politicians in Westminster and all around the world, Capitol Hill, are all kind of, you know, especially on Capitol Hill, bought and bloody paid for. They've got to realise that they're in the bloody sights of this whole operation too, because they are due to no longer exist, but to be replaced by technocrats eventually. And they want a world of regions, because if you're going to have total control of people in the Orwellian police state way that they want. This is why things like the Hunger Games, they have sectors which are fenced off from the other sectors. Is you need to do it right into the local level if you want total control. And this is why you're seeing this movement of the police state going into communities at a lower and lower level. So one area of this structure that they want is breaking countries up into regions. And this is one of the maps for how they intend to break up Europe. European Union into regions. And what they have planned is that regions of one country are connected into regions in another, therefore destroying national sovereignty and national unity, because they want an end to sovereignty. They want an end to all of it. They just want technocrats, bureaucrats, and uniform impositions of the decisions made by those people, and no democratic things at all. Now, this is something called America 2050. This is all connected into the agenda for Agenda 21, and they have broken up America into a series of mega regions in which they will have mega cities, what they call human settlement zones, which I'll get to. And part of this Agenda 21 is for an enormous cull of the global population. And I'm not kidding when I say cull. I'm talking coming down to 1 billion or half a billion in a world now of more than 7 billion. In 1979, these appeared in Georgia. They're called America's Stonehenge, the Georgia Guidestones, they call them. No one can put their finger on where they came from, who was behind them, and all the rest of it. They're aligned, astrologically aligned, and there's writing of them, written in stone and all that stuff, in different modern languages and some ancient languages, I think including Babylonian. And they call for the population of humanity to be maintained under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. A draft copy of the United Nations Global Biodiversity Assessment calls for the world population to be reduced to some 1 billion, and Nick Rockefeller told Aaron Russo when that conversation took place that the population was going to be reduced by at least half. Whichever it is, there are massive reductions in population. And this guy, Gates, and his missus, through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, are absolutely bloody obsessed, Bono's mates, with what they call population reduction. This is the image, the eye again, of this international hygiene meeting or event in Germany. And people don't realize that Hitler's race purity program was orchestrated from America and Britain, not least through the Rockefeller family, who paid for a whole floor of a German university to be occupied by Ernst Rudin and his team. Ernst Rudin was Hitler's race purity expert. And the Rockefellers, who were big time into eugenics and all this stuff, they sent eugenics experts to Germany to help and promote and give them information, backing and expertise in the program. The way that they plan to cull the population is cumulatively and in some ways directly. The cumulative is through vaccinations, through genetically modified food. Americans are awash with genetically modified food through genetically modified corn and stuff, and the impact on American health is cata-bloody-strophic. Why wouldn't it be? Fluoride and stuff in the water, hunger, also manufactured disease and radiation. And also, what did Dr. Richard Day say in 1969? Euthanasia and the demise pill. Limiting access to affordable medical care makes eliminating the elderly easier. We now have this Liverpool care pathway where doctors are deciding, often without even consulting the family, who is going to have their withdrawal of food, of fluids and of drugs so that they die very quickly. It's not the care pathway, it's the death pathway. We also have this situation in America with the death panels deciding who gets treatment and who doesn't among the bloody elderly. It's euthanasia. That's what it bloody is. And here, in terms of reducing the population, how about this? First of all, sperm counts in many parts of the world are plummeting. Why? They want to reduce the population, plummeting. And here's one. The third generation of rats fed genetically modified food becomes sterile. And there's a company, a biotech company, a small one in California called Epicite, and they came up with something called the Epicite gene. You know, long ago today, when we started, and I was talking about crazes, well, crazes, okay, crazes. What they did was isolate the gene that makes people sterile. It is a gene which, if it becomes part of your genetic structure, attacks sperm. It attacks sperm if you are male and kills them, so you are sterile. And any sperm entering the female that has that genetic part of its structure, then attacks the sperm and kills it, so they're sterile. Now, why would you create that? Well, okay, I don't know. But what did they then do, Epicite? They genetically engineered that gene into frigging corn. And then we go the next step. Monsanto and DuPont set up a joint venture to take over the Epicite gene and commercialize it. And if anyone thinks that, you know, this is an exaggeration involving reduction in population, this is a map of America under the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, the Wildlands Project, and it is America that they want to see under Agenda 21. If you can't read the words, I'll tell you this. The red bits are for little to no human use. The yellow bits are for highly regulated use. The only bits for normal use are these bits here and there that are in green. And they have to therefore clear the land to bring this about. And that's what they are doing, which explains so much that is going on that people don't say, why are they doing this? I'll tell you why they're doing this. Agenda 21, get them off the land. There's now a rural, White House Rural Council, which has all the government agencies, including the Department of Defense, to help rural communities. No, it is to rid rural communities of people under Agenda 21 and under eco-fascism. One of the things they're doing is creating more and more and more environmental regulations to make it impossible for small farmers and small growers and small landowners to survive in the rural communities. And therefore, they're destroying the rural communities to get them off the land. They're sending in these SWAT teams, bloody Keystone bloody cops, to treat decent people trying to grow organic and raw milk, produce raw milk. They're treating them appallingly, brutally, horrifically. And they are designed to get people off the land. Monsanto, no food shall be grown that we don't own. And more regulations to get people in a situation where it's impossible to continue. And who moves in? The corporations to take over the land. More and more we're seeing, so many stories on my website recently, more and more people are having their community gardens destroyed because they're told it's not in the zonal regulations, even though people are hungry and are getting the food for nothing. They're being banned from growing food in their front garden and all the other stuff at a time of great economic challenge. And this is what Dr. Richard Day said in 1969. Growing food will be banned by saying it isn't safe, and the state corporations will control all food production. The supply and distribution of food will be monitored so that no one can give food to a fugitive of the system. And they're also doing it by changing the regulations to stop people growing food at home. So that all these things are coming together so that only the Food Inc., big food, will control the food chain. And who gets food? Those that conform to the system. And they're doing it in other ways. When in 2011 they had those floods in the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, the US Army Corps of Engineers announced that they had to blow the levees, I think it was on the Missouri, to save people further down the river. So they blew the levees, and this is what happened to the land of small farmers all around that region, destroyed. 3 weeks later, letters arrive from the government offering to buy the land through the US Corps of Engineers, or Army of Engineers. The Army Corps of Engineers, whatever they call it. And the other thing they're doing is taking out freeway exits to rural communities, which used to be very helpful economically. And what they're doing instead is putting these corporation kind of food centres in the middle of bloody nowhere, which helps basically no one. And these communities, these rural communities, are dying. And people are leaving, and they're taking the bloody land over. They are taking out dams so that people can't farm anymore. They are destroying or closing rural roads. Or they are, on a massive scale, taking the tarmac from roads and leaving them as gravel, making it more and more difficult for people to live in rural communities. It's all being done on purpose. And this bloke, you know, when he came in, Cameron, never mentioned it in the election, and then suddenly announces he wants to sell off all the forests of Britain, all the state forests. That's Agenda 21. Now, because the people responded, he had to take a step back, but he'll still go on trying to do it, if not en masse, then in little bits. And this big society, it's just Agenda 21. And what's happening in this country? Small farmers are going out of business on a fantastic bloody scale. Getting them off the land, that's the bloody idea. And where do they want to put them in? Human settlement zones. They want this kind of in by 2050, 2060. And it's the world of the Hunger Games. They want, this is in their bloody documents, they want to pack people together in high-rise, basically prison cell-sized living space. So all the people, those that they don't want to cull, are in one place, and they've cleared the land of everything else, straight off the pages of Hunger Games, that is. This is Michael Bloomberg, Mayor of New York, massive insider in all this and frontman, and he has just announced in the last few months the first phase of Agenda 21, he doesn't call it that, of course, building of 165,000 units in New York, right? Absolutely, the specification and the way that they are going to be built and arranged is classic Agenda 21. And the space that these apartments will cover for each person or family is between these two yellow lines. They are 10 feet by 30 bloody feet. Classic Agenda 21. Building regulations are being changed in places like California to stop, to reduce the amount of land that is used to build buildings. And by 2020, this directive of the European Union says that all new building must use nearly zero energy by 2020. And that means massive changes in the structure and nature of human society and living space. Some of the bloody houses that they're talking about for people under Agenda 21, you know, talk about bloody uninspired. And then one of the things that was emphasized in the Hunger Games was the high-speed train that took the competitors from the sectors to the capital for this, you know, kill-to-the-death bloody games. And high-speed train networks are all part of Agenda 21. They want that to be the main source because they want an end of people and cars and stuff like that, except then. But they want high-speed trains to be the prime source of, or form of transport. And interestingly, you know, here's the regions that they want under Agenda 21 in America, everyone else off the land in all these other places. And, you know, once the plane arrived, American trains just disappeared, Amtrak, they just, you know, basically hardly anyone used them. It was all aircraft. Well, suddenly, out of nowhere, Obama announced a massive building program, phased building program, for high-speed train networks in America. And when you look at where he wants to build them, it's like placing them over a map of the Agenda 21 regions of America. And then, of course, out of nowhere, Cameron announced this year the biggest railway building program since Victorian times with high-speed stuff. And these high-speed networks are happening all over Europe. And I tell you this, I know this for a fact, that at least some, probably many, of the people apparently working for European train companies orchestrating this high-speed network they're building don't work for the train companies, they work for bloody NATO, that is doing the orchestrating. And the Rothschilds are massively behind this in the banking system. This is Nathan Rothschild, the man who was responsible for building up the Rothschild empire in Britain. I care not what puppet is placed upon the throne of England to rule the empire on which the sun never sets. The man who controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the British money supply. And if you have one single currency, whoever controls that money supply controls the bloody world. That's the idea. And if you control the banks, and you control the central banks, and you control the reporting of the financial industry, you stitch the whole bloody thing up. In 2008, when the crash happened, I said that three things would happen. First of all, there was the crash of 2008, that had happened, then that said there's a problem. Two, governments throw fantastic amounts of borrowed money, credit at the perpetrators, the banks, until their financial barrels are empty. We're there. And then at some point, they want to crash the economy again on a massive scale to create the situation where there is a complete transformation of the financial system in the way that they want to create it, and it will be based on a world central bank, they're already talking about it, which would dictate all global finance. What are they doing in the European Union? Stepping stones, totalitarian tiptoe. They're saying as a result of the financial crisis in Europe, which these have created, we must have centralized control of all the banking in Europe. And then you look at the people who are coming forward to solve the problem. When we had the crash in 2008, the Bush Treasury Secretary was Hank Paulson, who'd come a few years earlier from Goldman Sachs, where he was Chief Executive Officer. The new head of the European Central Bank is Mario Draghi. Mario Draghi is a former employee of Goldman Sachs. The guy currently unelected and running Italy, Mario Monti, is a former executive of Goldman Sachs. And former executive of Goldman Sachs is like saying former agent of the bloody CIA. They never are. So all this money was hosed at the banking system, and in that way, a banking crisis became a government crisis. Because now, the money's come from the government to the banks, and the governments are then making it a people crisis. And we said, what just happened? I thought it was a banking crisis. Now they're taking everything away. Austerity programs. Agenda 21. That's what it's all about. And see, what they want is a single currency. That's what they want. So the euro was never an end in itself. It was always a stepping stone to the single currency. All the euro is a stalking horse which has been used to delete the multi-currencies of Europe. It's deleted the guilder, it's deleted the mark, it's deleted the lira. But it's not an end in itself. It's a way of deleting all those independent currencies. And they want, eventually, the euro, it might be tomorrow, but they want the euro to disappear so the world currency can come forward. And people like George Soros, one of the demo cons and a Rothschild frontman, he and the Vatican has called for world central bank and a world government and all the rest of it. The IMF, which is just another agency of the bloodlines, is now taking over control of countries like Ireland and others on the basis of this economic crash which has been manipulated. And again, no heart, no empathy, consequences for people, consequences for families, consequences for children. They couldn't give a shit because they have no empathy. And what we are seeing all over Europe is this gathering economic situation because it's manipulated for a specific end. Britain is now £1 trillion in debt. And the more and more debt people or countries get into, the more and more control they give away to others. America has just passed $16 trillion in debt. In truth, it's bloody bankrupt. And it's being done systematically. I've been saying this for years. America is being used to destroy America, economically and militarily. Any country that cared about the people in a massive economic crisis would not be spending trillions on the bloody military and wars in different parts of the world. But it ain't the American military. It's the cabal's military being used to orchestrate the campaign of acquisition for the cabal. Therefore, they're just using America's economy to bloody pay for it. And the idea of destroying America is if you have superpowers that have the economic and military might to say no to your world government, you do not have a world dictatorship. So destroying superpowers is absolutely crucial to this world dictatorship that they want to bring in and are in the process of bringing in. Because in the end, this world government structure of fascist control, it's not bothered about what the form of control is. It just wants the control. So it's quite happy for independent banks and biotechs and energy companies to be brought together under so-called government control. Under, like Orwell's ministries. So they'd have a World Ministry of Oil, a World Ministry of Biotech. The World Health Organization, created by the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, by the way, would become the World Health Ministry, controlling all pharmaceutical stuff and health and what have you, what passes for health with these people. And therefore, that we've got to be streetwise, that if we see this happening, we don't say, yeah, get the banks and all that stuff, because we'll be cheering for the next stage of control, which is even more than it is now. And talking about, the economy and debt, this is what this is about. Debt is control. So let's get young people up to their neck in debt, massive debt, which they then spend the rest of their lives paying off, just to be bloody programmed with a system's version of events. This is a great list. This is what you learn from school. Truth comes from authority. Intelligence is the ability to remember and repeat. Accurate memory and repetition are rewarded. Non-compliance is punished. Conform intellectually and socially. This guy, H.L. Mencken, said, the aim of public education is not to spread enlightenment at all. It is simply to reduce as many individuals as possible to the same self-level, to breed a standard citizenry, to put down dissent and originality. And there was a study at the William and Mary College in Virginia where they studied the personality changes as people went through school. And they found this, a massive decline in creativity as children have become less emotionally expressive, less energetic, less talkative and verbally expressive, less humorous, less imaginative, less unconventional, less lively and passionate, less perceptive, less apt to connect seemingly irrelevant things, dots, less synthesizing and less likely to see things from a different angle. That's what they found happens as people go further and further into system. And now they want to take this system and they want to make the kids pay for it with debt for much of the rest of their lives, right? Now, here's my suggestion, here's my question. What do you want to bloody do it for? What do you want to do it for? Why do you want to go through this system and have them tell you what you must think about every bloody thing? And if you don't tell the exam paper what it's told you to believe, then you won't pass. Why is it the done thing that you go through school, kitty kitty, and then you then have to go to university. Oh yes, you go to university, that's what you have to do. Oh, you've got a chance to go to university and you're not taking it. Oh, you're crazy. Oh, I'm not speaking to you anymore, and I'm your father, and all this bollocks, right? Well, and I see these protests of young people and students in London and stuff over the ever-increasing fees that are being charged to get ever-increasing debt for control over young people at the earliest possible stage in their lives. And I see them do their protests and all that stuff, and that's great. And then they go back to bloody college and university. The only way it's going to change is if they refuse to bloody go. Don't take part in the system. Now, and then they say, well, I won't get a good job if I don't go to university. I know university students are packing shelves in supermarkets. Surely you have the creative ability to create a life without going through this friggin' sausage machine. Come on, we can do this. We don't need the bloody system. Destroying rainforests. People like Monsanto are destroying massively species diversity, so we're becoming a monoculture. The planet is being killed by these people. The organic planet is being killed by the inorganic. Monsanto wants to replace all natural crops and seed varieties worldwide with genetically modified species. They are creating the GMO superweeds, which are creating mayhem. This is the Archon world, what the corporations are doing to the rainforests. And the bloody Greens ought to turn their bloody heads at this part of the agenda and not be diverted away from this bollocks which is being orchestrated by the people doing this. It's interesting that they talk about the Grim Reaper in terms of genetically modified food. The Grim Reaper, yeah, Saturn. There's Monsanto. What they do, this guy Michael Taylor is a Monsanto executive, and then he moves to a government agency that's supposed to be policing Monsanto. And then he moves back to Monsanto, and now he moves back to government that's supposed to be policing Monsanto. And now this guy, this crook, is in charge, in effect, of the entire United States food policy. And he's a front man for Monsanto. There you go, GMO. This is the other agenda. They want to kind of drug people and poison people, but there are other people with a mind of their own that actually can see this and are trying to avoid it with organic food and with alternative methods of healing, with alternative supplements that the food no longer gives us. And the authorities like the EU and the Food and Drug Administration in America and all these bloody crooks, they're all front agencies for the biotech and pharmaceutical cartel, and they are destroying the opposition, and they're doing something more. They're destroying any alternative to the corporate system because they want everybody in there, no exceptions. The Fabian Society was actually named after a Roman general called Fabius, and his claim to fame was never having battles with the enemy that could prove decisive either way. His method of taking over was to weaken and weaken and weaken the enemy over a period of time, and then when they were so weak to resist, then move in. That is precisely what the system is doing. It's making us weaker and weaker, well, people that go with it at the moment, weaker and weaker by the food we eat, the water we drink, by the electromagnetic fields that we come into, by economic suppression and manipulation. All these things are being done to weaken and weaken and weaken the target population, Fabius style, so eventually they think they can just walk in when we're too weak to resist. That's the bloody idea. Physical control. I'll get through this pretty quick. Physical control, okay, major aspect of physical control, take over the countries. This is not a map, it's a wish list. It's a wish list of countries in North Africa, the Middle East and the Near East, which they are picking off one after the other. Libya, now they're into Syria, they're starting trouble in Lebanon, they're in Iraq, they're in Afghanistan. Of course, they want Iran. And what they're doing is they're finding different excuses to pick off different countries, because they have to find different excuses, or people might think that there's a pattern here. This is what Libya looked like in 2007. This is what the same street looks like in 2011. What happened was that they've got this system where they want to target someone. So what they do is they fund and train rebels covertly, and they bloody arm them. And then they get the rebels to start shooting at government targets. Political response, media response. Then the governments start shooting back at the rebels. Political response, they're shooting and killing their own people. Media response, the same. Oh, we've got to send people in, humanitarian, and in come the de facto bloody world army, NATO, dropping bombs everywhere. And now they're doing the same in bloody Syria. It's not a Syrian civil war, it's a mercenary bloody war. That's what that is. You know, NATO bloody weapons here in the boxes for them. And this neocon organization, the Project for the New American Century, it was behind the Bush administration, and in September 2000, before the Bush administration came in, it produced a document which called for the incoming Bush administration and America to fight, quote, multiple theaters of war in places like Libya and Syria and all these countries. But it said in the document, in September 2000, but this process of transformation, this takeover of country after country, was likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. 1 year to the month after that document was published, 9 months after the same people came to power in the Bush administration, the United States had what Bush called our Pearl Harbor, and as a result, they justified the targeting of all the countries that were in that document. This is a man called General Wesley Clark, and he said this in a television interview. This is not God's gift of peace either. He led the NATO attacks in the former Yugoslavia, but he said in a television interview in 2007 that immediately after 9/11, he was told that a coup was being plotted by Dick Cheney, Vice President then, Don Rumsfeld, Defense Secretary, Paul Wolfowitz, Defense Secretary Deputy, and what he called a half a dozen other collaborators from the Project for the New American Century that included an invasion of Iraq. 6 weeks later, he said, he was back with the guy, and he saw the same officer, and he said, "Why haven't we attacked Iraq? Are we still going to attack Iraq?" And this officer said to him, this is again, after 9/11, 6 weeks, "Sir, it's worse than that." The officer pulled up a piece of paper off his desk and said, "I just got this memo from the Secretary of Defense's office. It says we're going to attack and destroy the governments in 7 countries in 5 years. We're going to start with Iraq, and then we're going to move to Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran." And Clark said the aim of the plot was they wanted us to destabilize the Middle East, turn it upside down, and make it under our control. And that is the agenda that's been followed, and all these excuses to pick off country over country are just that, bloody excuses. And, of course, one of the things they want is to get to the China and Russian border. They want a third world war with China and Russia. It's been in their documents for ages. So we look at Iran. And this is how many wars they have instigated or fought since the Second World War. Actually, that's how many they've instigated for about 200 bloody years. This is how many the USA has fought with Britain in tag most of the bloody time since the Second World War. These are American bases around Iran. Who's threatening who, one wonders? Iranians are just the same as you and me. People that just want to get on with their lives and their families and all the rest of it. But let's demonize them. Let's demonize them and let's bomb them. Why? We have no heart. We love death. These bloody pillocks doing all this stuff. Violent extremists. Yeah, look in the bloody mirror. Look at them. Talk about inversion. The bloody terrorists fighting terrorism. I love it. War is peace, slavery is freedom, ignorance is strength. What is that? Archontic inversion. It's all a bloody movie that we're coming through, and it's all leading up to World War III. But Rothschild Zionism, which is actually not about Jewish people, it's about a secret society created and instigated and controlled by the Rothschilds. The Jewish people are just used as the bloody front to cover the real thing about Rothschild Zionism, which is a bloody secret society and part of the cabal. And what they do is that anyone that challenges the Rothschilds and Rothschild Zionism and its agenda, they are called anti-Semitic and all this stuff. As this lady says, anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, and even bloody Orthodox Jewish rabbis are saying the bloody same. You don't have to be a Jewish to be a Zionist. That's what Joe Biden said. Absolutely you don't. Most bloody great, Zionists in America are Christian bloody Zionists, believe in bloody Armageddon. And you get Orthodox Jews that absolutely oppose Zionism. Another Jew against Zionism. I'm Jewish and I want Israel to stop killing Palestinians. Jews against the occupation. These are wonderful Jewish young people that refuse. These are wonderful Jewish young people that refuse to serve in the military and do this to Palestinian bloody kids. That's what we need. How many people know that this is going on between Jewish people and Ahmadinejad? Eh? How many people know this is going on? This is the dynamic between a country of 300+ million and one of less than 8 million. Why? Because the Rothschilds are the controllers of Israel and they're controllers of the USA, and they're different hands on the same bloody body. And it's all this money that's handed by America to Israel. It ain't going to the rank and file Israelis. This is 400,000 people on the streets of Israel last year because of their economic situation. 2 people at least have set fire to themselves in bloody protest. And what we bloody need so much is for the people of Israel who are being suppressed by their bloody hierarchy come together in common cause with Palestinians and Americans and British and Australians and Africans who are being suppressed by their hierarchy. And realise that all those hierarchies are the same frickin' hierarchy. Let's come together. It's their worst bloody nightmare. This is why America and Israel work as one unit. They're both controlled by the same bloody lot. This is why he won't say a word, or any other president, when this mayhem and slaughter is going on. What's happening in Palestine is frickin' genocide. No other word for it. Genocide, the systematic and widespread extermination or attempted extermination of an entire national, racial, religious or ethnic group. This is Rothschild Zionism, this is Rothschild Zionism, so is bloody this. All the time, Palestinian homes, often for generations, bulldozed to make way for these bloody fanatics and these bloody crazies in the military and government. Yeah, we're going to build a wall. We're going to take the land. No one's going to say anything. This is bloody Israel, controlled by the Rothschilds. No one says no to the Rothschilds. They know the consequences. Hey, Palestinian children's playground. We want it for our wall. Genocide. Bloody genocide. This is Palestinian land, the green, in 1946, 1947, 1967. Today, genocide, the systematic and widespread extermination or attempted extermination of an entire national, racial, religious or ethnic group. This is going on before our eyes. We'd never let it happen again. We're watching it happen again. This is not even about Jewish people and the benefits. They were hung out to dry in bloody Germany. They'll be hung out to dry again whenever it suits these people. That's the bloody thing. The elephant in the living room. And people are terrified of talking about it because all the Anti-Defamation League and these Rothschild fronts jump on you. Anti-Semite, racist. They've tried it with me. But this guy, Albert Pike, was a high Freemason in America. And he wrote a letter, it said, someone say it's a forgery or a fake. Well, my God, I tell you what, these fakes and forgeries don't often tell a bloody tale with the hindsight of history. That's actually turned out to be true. Albert Pike, letter to Giuseppe Mazzini in 1871. He talked about 3 world wars coming, so that and each one would go towards eventually taking over the world. And he talked about the First World War and the Second World War and how the Second World War would create a homeland for what he called political Zionism. And then he said this about the Third World War. The Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agentur of the Illuminati, the network, the bloodlines, between the political Zionists, Israel in other words, and leaders of the Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam, the Muslim Arabic world, and political Zionism, the State of Israel, because they knew that was coming even then, mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, note that, mutually destroy each other. Are you listening, people of Israel? Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral and spiritual and economical exhaustion. And then he was pointing out that then they would move in and say, we can save everything, but you have to do what we say, and they have to do it the way we say it too. This is the police state. This is the world of Agenda 21 that they want to bring in if we bleed and allow it, and we shouldn't. I mean, in terms of numbers, I mean, crikey, it's a no contest. Divide and rule stops us doing it. And we've reached to this point in physical control where he has a kill list, which people are then killed without trial or a judicial process or anything. He can, murder people in effect without recourse. You may have seen, and I've seen it all over the world, how the nature of police has changed. I call it recruiting the crazies. What they've been doing for decades now is recruiting law enforcement all around the world, Britain as well, not on the basis of whether they can do the job for the benefit of the community as they used to do, many of them do, and many of them still try to do it within a system that's a nightmare for them trying. You know, so many decent policemen are leaving, police officers are leaving, because they can't stand the fucking system that's coming in because the crazies are taking it over. And what they've been doing is recruiting on the basis of personality type rather than ability to do the job. And the personality types they want are narcissists, a psychological condition characterized by preoccupation, lack of empathy, and unconditional deficits in self-esteem, and psychopaths, a person with an antisocial personality disorder manifested in aggressive, perverted, criminal, or immoral behavior. And this is the common theme, without empathy or remorse. And that's why you're seeing the change in personality so dramatically in law enforcement around the world. And we get in a situation, this guy, Brandon Raub, all he did was write on his, I think it was his Twitter or one of these social networks, Facebook or whatever, about, you know, certain things about the New World Order and 9/11 he didn't like, gets picked up and taken away to a psychiatric hospital. And he would probably still be there if there wasn't this massive public outcry and help from a civil rights organisation that sorted him out. Here you go, committing war crimes, happily retired, committing war crimes, wins Peace Prize, exposing war crimes, considered terrorist. And we're seeing all this stuff coming in, and all the bloody drones in the sky, and all this stuff around in space, and hijacking the internet, and the microchipping agenda that's coming in, stepping stone style with the electronic tattoo, as they call it, and stuff, and, you know, using barcodes for babies instead of names. And I love this one. You take a bloody tablet, and it's got a microchip in it, Stage 1, patient takes pill and has been modified to contain edible microchip. 2, after pill is swallowed, chip is activated by stomach fluids, sending signal on patch to arm. 4, receiver transmits information to mobile, telling patient when next dose is due and provides other health data. What? But you know what the agenda is? The agenda is that people will be drugged and they will be technologically monitored. We're looking a little bit further in the future now, but this is the agenda. They will be electronically, technologically monitored to make sure they have the drug, and that is the brave new world of suppression by medication. And so I say to New Agers and people like that who say, oh, it's negative, listen, turn round and face it now, while we're still in a situation we can turn this around, or face it then. That's your choice.